Alright everyone, so in this video, pag-uusapan natin kung ano nga ba ang IPO. With all the hullabaloo lately of IPOs, merong oldie, merong Medilines, and so on, no? I figured it was a good time to release a video in case meron iba sa atin na hindi pa sure kung ano nga ba ang IPO, na baka hindi pa buo ang pagkakaintindi kung ano nga ba ang ine-entail ng isang IPO and the other terms that come along with it, no? So, kung meron ka pang pagdududa or pagkukulang sa kaalaman with regards sa IPO, then this video is for you. Now, before we continue, I just want to share a quote from Warren Buffett. An IPO is like a negotiated transaction. The seller chooses when to come public, and it's unlikely to be a time favorable to you. Okay, so bago tayo mag-proceed sa pagpapaliwanag kung ano nga ba ang IPO, before we think about all the positives of what an IPO can do for a trader or investor, we need to understand na yung IPO, in a lot of ways, exit strategy din yan eh. It's an exit strategy for yung angel investors or initial investors for them to be able to not just recoup but to actually gain money or gain profits dun sa mga initial na pinuhunan nila sa kumpanya na yon. So, let's not focus solely on, kasi kapag ganito, nag-IPO, makaka-own na ako ng part na company niyon. We also need to understand yung transactional part niya. Okay? Now, moving on. Ano nga ba ang IPO? An initial public offering, or IPO, refers to the process of offering shares of a private company or corporation in a new stock issuance. Okay? So an IPO allows a company or corporation to raise capital from public investors. Why is this a good thing? Kasi syempre, minsan gusto nang lumaki ng isang kumpanya and mas madali nilang gawin yon and mas economical if they raise capital from public investors rather than patuloy lang na umutang or mag-collateral or whatever sa mga bangko or other financial institutions. Okay? Plus usually, mas mabilis din yung pag-raise ng pera in this way. Now, fun fact lang, no? Prior to an IPO, a company, regardless of its size, is considered, quote-unquote, private. In order to go public, then you need to do an IPO. Okay? Now, what do you look for when considering an IPO? So first and foremost, you need to understand the business. Okay? So kunyari, yung oldie, ano ba ginagawa ng oldie? Diba? Nagtitinda ba sila ng taho? Nagtitinda ng tsinelas? Kailangan na intindihan natin kung ano yung negosyo nila. Then we need to understand the risk. Now, a lot of people tend to focus on the fact na, kasi yung nun nakita ko, nagsiling agad 3 straight days for example, or nakita ko yung KPPI, lumipad, ang laki ng tinaas from yung simula. So, ibig sabihin, kikita ako ng limpak-limpak na salapi kapag nakapag-invest ako sa IPO. That's simply not true, no? If you look at historical data, most IPOs, if you go check, so yung kahit na yung mga tumaas so yung mga Wilcon, Monde, Converge, even yung mga mas luma, Chelsea, Shell, and so on, lahat sila either umatras muna bago tumaas, meaning highly likely makakakuha ka ng better entry bago siya tumaas, okay? Or hindi sila tumaas at all. Yung iba, bumaba lang. Maaring tumaas sila panandalian, pero in the long run, bumaba sila. Meaning, hindi man lang nila na-maintain or na keep up yung IPO price nila. So, you need to understand the risk that just because nag-invest ka sa IPO, it doesn't necessarily mean na you're gonna hit the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, na makaka-jackpot ka na. That's not how it works. Okay? There's still risks involved. Next, you need to research yung company management. Sino ba nagpapatakbo ng kumpanyang yon? Kasi, kung kunwari, hindi maganda yung nagpapatakbo ng kumpanya, meaning hindi maabilidad. Diba? Mamaya, as soon as makuha nila IPO money, resign, quit, takbo. Diba? Hindi natin alam eh. So we need to research company management. We need to understand gaano ba sila, ano yung track record nila? Gaano sila kagaling magpatakbo ng negosyo? Gaano sila kagaling magpalaki? Na IPO na ba ibang negosyo nila before? Ano yung nangyari? Anong nangyari sa negosyong yun? Lumaki ba? Lumago ba? And so on. And then you need to know why they're listing and what they're using the funds for. So I always say na if you go back and watch yung all the na IPO video, even yung SGP na FOO, you need to understand na kung saan nila gagamitin yung pera na maukuha nila sa pag-raise nila ng kapital. Kung kunwari karamihan ng pera na pupunta sa pambayad ng utang, then they're not gonna have a lot of money to to do more projects, to expand their business. Diba? Of course, this is a parang general overview. Hindi lahat ng situation pareho. There might be times na yung magbayad ng utang is simply the most prudent thing to do, and by doing so, doon pwedeng mas lumago yung negosyo nila. I don't know. But generally speaking, you want na hindi lahat ng pera na nare-raise ng capital, nare-raise ng IPO is napupunta sa pagbayad ng utang or napupunta sa bulsa ng may-ari. And then you need to look at the financials. Just because tag-IPO sila, it doesn't necessarily mean that the company is making money. It doesn't even mean that they're headed towards making money. Kasi as we know, a lot of companies, lalo na sa simula, hindi naman kumikita agad yan eh. May mga kumpanya na nahihirapan sa simula, but over time, with hard work, with dedication, then the company slowly starts making money, tapos magi-snowball yon, may effect. But you need to look at the financials. Baka naman palala lang ng palala bawat taon. Or baka naman sobrang tagal na, hindi pa rin kumikita ng pera yung kumpanya. Which leads you back to number 4, na saan nga ba nila gagamitin yung funds? Diba? And then finally, number 6, you need to know who the underwriter is. This is also important because aside from yung track record ng kumpanya, you also need to know ano yung track record ng underwriter. Diba? Sino na ba yung mga na-underwrite niya before? Diba? Who has this underwriter worked with? Kapag kunyari mga joint underwriters, then who have they worked with? Have they worked together before? Ano yung resulta? Maganda ba yung kinahinatnan? And so on. Okay? Now, when trying to reserve or subscribe to an IPO, we often hear the term oversubscribe or undersubscribe. So let's just clear that up. Ano nga ba ang oversubscription or ano nga ba ang oversubscribe? When the demand for a new public issue of shares is greater than the number of shares offered, the IPO is said to be oversubscribed. Okay? So kaya minsan may naririnig kayo ng mga 3 times oversubscribed or 10 times oversubscribed. It means na kung yung number of shares na on offer, at least in that specific broker is kunyari 100 shares, pero 300 yung demand, then it's 3 times oversubscribed. Parang ganon. Okay? Now, oversubscription is a generic barometer of the potential early success of an IPO. Remember, the key terms here is generic barometer and early. Okay? Generic barometer in the sense na just because oversubscribed siya, it doesn't necessarily mean nalilipad yan. Okay? And just because na oversubscribed siya, tapos lumipad nga siya sa simula, it doesn't mean na masusustain yung success na yon over a long period of time. Maaari na, okay, sa simula, malakas, tuloy-tuloy, lipad. Tapos, after a while, babaksak din pala. Okay, for example, yung Double Dragon before. Yung Double Dragon before, it went all the way up to 80 to 100, something like that. Sorry, hindi ko maalala exact number. But ngayon, where is it trading at? Diba? Oversubscribe siya. Sa simula, lumipad. Pero if you were an investor, if you were planning to hold it for long term, papamana mo sa mga anak mo or whatever, then obviously, hindi ganon yung naging resulta. Hindi maganda yung kinahinatnan. Okay, so just because it's oversubscribed, it doesn't necessarily mean na you should be over the moon and lahat magliliparan na and you should be super happy. Okay? On the flip side, ano naman kung undersubscribed? Ano ibig sabihin na undersubscribed? When the amount of shares supplied by the firm is greater than the demand, the IPO is said to be undersubscribed. So, Ganon din. So if 100 shares were on offer, pero 10 lang yung sinubscribe-ban or 10 lang yung reserve, then undersubscribe siya. Typically, high cost, weak promotion, and market conditions factor into the undersubscription of an IPO. So yung high cost, hindi na natin kailangan pag-usapan yun kasi very obvious naman eh. Yung weak promotion, a lot of people fail to understand na ang market, ano yan eh, one giant ad. And IPOs are no different. If you want to push an IPO, then kailangan yung underwriter mo, diba, malakas magtulak, malakas mag-commercial. Kasi kung hindi siya magaling mag-commercial, parang ganun eh. Kunyari, sabihin natin, merong bagong brand ng bubblegum na lumabas. Okay, masarap naman siya. Kaso, wala. Hindi siya nagmamarketing. Diba? Meron siya sa iilang stores lang. So, dahil doon, mas walang bibili ng bubblegum na yon. Ganon din kapag undersubscribe yung IPO. May mga pagkakataon na mahina yung pag-promote nung IPO, kaya walang bumibili. Hindi dahil pangit siya or whatever. And then finally, of course, market conditions do factor into the undersubscription. Kasi minsan, kapag talagang bear yung market, then people don't want to jump into something new, especially something na medyo risky. Diba? They would rather stick with the old reliables, yung sa mga kilala na nila. Diba? Kumbaga, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. Same thing with IPO. So, minsan, it's better for some people to just stick with the stocks that they know. Kung talagang bubodegahin din lang naman nila, iipunin lang nila, rather than going for an IPO, lalo na kapag hindi maganda ang market conditions. Okay? Now, ano pa ang ibang key considerations? First is yung lockup period. Usually, when a company goes public, the underwriters make company insiders sign a lockup agreement. When I say insiders, it usually pertains sa mga company officials, yung mga higher-ups, mga ganon. Kasi para hindi nga naman nila biglang benta kagad yung shares sila as soon as mag-open yung IPO. So usually, meron yung lockup agreement. Yung lockup agreement, you usually find it in the prospectus or ina-announce yan sa PSE Edge and things like that, no? So, iba-iba rin yan. May iba 6 months, may iba 1 year. I'm not 100% sure kung meron bang minimum or maximum amount of time that you can be locked up. All I know is iba-iba siya. And then meron ding waiting period. Some investment banks include waiting periods in their offering terms. Meaning if you go through yung bank to invest, then minsan they include a waiting period dun sa kontrata. Okay? Now, paano ba mag-reserve ng shares para sa IPO? Typically, you reserve the number of shares you want to purchase through your broker. So, yung broker nyo, kapag ka may IPO, usually meron sila nakukuhang allocation. Now, I don't know how they decide which broker gets what or how many. Basta may nakukuha silang allocation. Then, i-allok nila ngayon yon sa mga clients nila. Now, may ibang broker, ang alam ko ginagawa nila, first come, first serve. Yung iba naman, they try to split it up as much as they can para everyone gets a little bit of nung shares. Kumbaga, parang each person gets a small slice of the pie hanggat kaya. So, depending on how your broker does things, it does vary. Now, aside from reserving or purchasing through your broker, kasi minsan wala kang makukuha eh, you can also subscribe via PSE-EC. Yung PSE-EC, I'll put a link to that in the description box below. So, ang kailangan nyo lang gawin doon is mag-register, then itatie up nyo kung sino man yung broker nyo. Ang difference lang is for most brokers sa PSE-EC, kunyari nag-reserve kayo, then you need to pay separate sa kung ano meron sa account nyo. Kasi kunyari nag-reserve kayo through your broker, ibabawas lang nila yon doon sa capital nyo doon sa kung ano man yung laman ng portfolio. Whereas sa PSE-EC, for most brokers, okay, you need to go to PNB to pay para maakuha kayo nung allocation. Okay, PNB or other banks that i-require nila. Now, I will have a separate video up sometime next week, around early November, where I show yung process na paggamit ko ng PSE-EC, no? So, I know I initially said na hindi ako kuha ng all-D na IPO, but I decided na it might be a good video and it might be a good experience to just get a little shares, small shares via PSEEC if I can. So, papakita ko yung process all the way hanggang sa huli kung makakuha nga ba talaga ako ng shares. So, wait for that video para further clarification regarding sa PSEEC at makita nyo rin yung exact process. Okay? Now, you only pay for the number of shares you end up receiving, not necessarily the number of shares you reserved. So, meaning, minsan, gusto mo kunyari magpa-reserve ng 10,000 shares, for example. Pero dahil nga oversubscribe siya or because your broker wants to give everyone a small piece of the pie, baka makuha mo is 1,000 shares lang or 5,000 shares lang. So, obviously, kahit mag-reserve ka ng 10,000 shares pero 5,000 lang ang nabigay sa'yo, yun lang ang kailangan mong bayaran. Okay? You don't have to pay for shares that you don't get. Now, I hope nakatulong sa inyo tong video na to. No? I hope nakapag bring siya ng further clarity kung ano nga ba ang I.P.O. Sana na-explain ko ng mabuti. And if nagustuhan nyo tong video na to, may natutunan kayo, or at least na-entertain kayo ng konti, I would really appreciate it if you give this video a like and consider subscribing to my channel. And as always guys, maraming salamat sa panonood. I really appreciate it. Good luck and happy trading!